is always underestimated at school. After all, he is still at level 3 for many years. But one day, due to an incident, he gets an overpower power from a king. With this power, the story of the main character will be dangerous because he will fight high-level monsters who descend to Earth to destroy humans. At the beginning of the story, we are shown a birthday party which was held by a small family, and the man who is having his birthday is the MC in this story, where this man is already 18 years old and he is named Yihao. On his birthday this time, he also has a small wish which contains that he hopes to live happily with his family. But that didn't last long, because, in the middle of the party they were having, a disaster appeared in the form of an explosion that occurred in all areas which made their mother, father, and younger sister fall from the buildings they were in. At the same time, a gigantic creature appeared which made Yihao's body now unable to move, as a result of fear of the figure that spread the aura of death in all directions. But in fact, it was all just a dream that was experienced by him, because what happened was Yihao was sleeping in the middle of his class. The teacher who found out that Yihao fell asleep in his class must be angry. As a result, the teacher ordered him to explain what Earth All Age meant. Yihao, who had previously fallen asleep, apologized to his teacher first, along with an alibi he put forward that he accidentally fell asleep because he studied late into the night. As a result with that, Yihao got the standing punishment at the back of the class. Master did it because he forgot that Yihao was a smart kid. If Yihao managed to answer his question, surely the teacher would feel embarrassed, because, in terms of ability, Yihao was only at B rank. And after Yihao was kicked out of his class, the teacher discussed a little about what Earth All Age is and what you've been hearing about. In 2036 a sudden disturbance in space and time turns the whole Earth into a dangerous game piece. Strong monsters started arriving randomly, but humans miraculously gained strength that was measured by a level or ability to develop various jobs and skills. After experiencing many years of disaster, 5 major alliances were finally formed which suppressed the power of the monsters and formed a new world order. And it was an era that was filled with danger and still filled with all the mysteries in it. Everyone is vying to level up to gain power, but Yihao is different from the usual leveling stories. Here we can see the HP and mana bar, also a person's level, and this bar can be seen by everyone or by monsters that will appear later. Continuing after school at Yihao Street Quarter, he was approached by 3 bullies at his school. One of them has an athletic body and his name is Feng. He came and asked for some money for this month's protection fee. But here Yihao said that 2 years ago when Feng was bullied by a senior student to collect protection fees, Yihao protected him like an older brother. But now Feng came to collect the protection fee for him. Feng, who heard him suddenly beat Yihao, said, "At that time I was blind. I thought I followed a genius who was a level 3 martial artist. The year I already leveled 5 and you are still level 3. Where at school Yihao has the nickname of Trash who can't level up in his school. But suddenly a kick landed that sent Feng flying away, and the brutal kick was carried out by a female student named Yunfei, who is Yihao's younger sister. Different from his older brother, Yunfei has above average talent because even though he is only 16 years old, he is already a level 7 fighter. Yunfei is predicted to have defeated a level 10 monster even though he is only level 7. Where Yunfei's arrival at that time made Feng and the other 2 hooligans fled in fear. Then the younger sister encouraged his older brother that someday Yihao would become a strong fighter. But even though getting the nickname Trash, Yihao never once complained about the situation he was in. He also has the principle of not giving up to protect his family and happiness. Yihao was determined to become the strongest. Before going home, he realized a strange thing related to his dream earlier, for that he will invite his family to party outside to guard against terrible things like in his dream. But after he finished partying outside and came back with a full stomach, nothing bad happened like in his dream. "Is it possible I'm worrying too much?" he said in his mind. But suddenly, from behind them, a portal appears which instantly causes panic among the residents around there. That's because the appearance of the portal usually coincides with the appearance of a monster coming out of the portal. And sure enough, a moment later a creature with 8 sharp legs appeared, and that was a level 15 Ghost Eye Demon Spider. Because he had no time to escape, his father finally sacrificed himself to buy time so he could restrain the creature. With his level that just reached level 10, even his punches didn't have a big impact on the spider. On the contrary, he had to be hit by the monster's attack and his body could no longer be moved. The mother who saw the incident intended to help her, but it was unlucky that her body had to be blown away due to the demon spider's attack. Suddenly one of the demon spider's legs was stuck with an arrow. Unknowingly the attack was carried out by Yunfei, who still had not moved away from the scene of the incident. On the other hand, with his body shaking, Yihao still couldn't believe that his nightmare at that time had now become a reality. In the presence of the spider demon, it made his mind feel stuck if he thought about his level is too far from that creature. During a battle with his current abilities, Yunfei was overwhelmed by the monster. As a result of that, he also received a wound on his left shoulder, followed by an execution attack aimed at Yunfei's body, which now could no longer be moved. Because Yihao was unable to do anything else, finally he had to replace the attack aimed at his younger sister, where the demon spider's spiky legs immediately barged into its body. Between life and death that he was currently experiencing, Yihao signaled his younger sister to quickly leave the place before it was too late. With only 1% of HP remaining, a notification suddenly appeared saying that the XP points he had collected met the requirements, and the king system has been activated. Because the current house or owner is no longer able to move, then the system will randomly have an account under the host name. Meanwhile, Yunfei, who was trying to escape from the place, was again ambushed by the spider demon. Even though Yihao had given it time to escape, now it was no longer unavoidable because the creature was right in front of his eyes. But during the loss of direction and hope for survival lies an attack that can knock the monster back. Yunfei, who was behind Yihao's back at this time, still couldn't believe that the strong man emitting fire from his body was his own elder brother. The spider was confused. How could this level 3 trash manage to attack him? This made the spider monster angry and prepared to attack. But Yihao, along with his new power, quickly shot up, together with a newly created fiery sword. And his powerful attack succeeded in cutting off the monster's 2 legs. But unfortunately, with this weak body, Yihao was only able to last for 3 seconds because his body was still unable to accommodate such a large force. Within his status was blazing gold-colored energy, whereas the time limit of the transforming energy that Yihao is currently using. And right now his blood was locked by that transformation energy. That's why Yihao must defeat the monster in front of him before his transformation energy runs out. Otherwise, he will die at the hands of the monster in front of him. After regenerating, the spider demons try to run away because he thinks it's only a waste of time dealing with level 3 humans and intends to look for other high-level humans. But suddenly his steps were stopped by the flames that spread all around him. "If you want to go, then go to hell," Yihao said, which made the spider break out into a cold sweat after seeing Yihao's strength just now. The thunderous footsteps indicated several high-level fighters that seemed to be coming toward the monster. "Don't go there, you will die," Yihao said. But they didn't listen to them at all because these words came from the mouth of a level 3 man. And sure enough, they haven't had time to land even one attack, but these fighters don't realize that their bodies have been entangled in a net that makes them unable to move their bodies. Not only that, these nets can absorb XP from someone, where the incident this time managed to make the demon spider go up 3 levels at once. After absorbing XP from previous betters, the demon spider, whose strength had now increased drastically, made Yihao feel pressured. And after being hit by an attack from the creature, he had to fall, followed by a system that said that the special skill Red Flame Storm had been prepared. When Yihao then got up, mercilessly he let out a blazing fiery storm. With its body currently being exposed to such fierce flames, the spider sensed that this attack was not an ordinary flame, it contained the power of a powerful king. And before his death, the creature had uttered the name of Master Kaian Saw, whose form had not yet been seen. Until finally this demon spider had to burn without leaving any residue from the battle area. Yihao, who managed to finish off the ghost demon spider, got 20,000 XP points. But because he had used up too much energy, at the end he had to fall along with the drop item he got. Yihao was unconscious now that he was suddenly in the system space, and because his body had been seriously injured from the previous fight. The system finally automatically recovered his body using the 10,000 XP points he had previously obtained. But at this time Yihao felt confused because his system room this time was completely different from his previous small space. The space currently occupied is more like a vast galaxy. And a little explanation about this system space: since Earth Old Age appeared, every player has their own system space to observe and determine their attributes, as well as store various kinds of equipment. Came back with Yihao, who was now in his new system room, and he found a body that was the source of Yihao's power before. This figure has the true identity of a king, namely Kaiyan, with a max level. And it is known that the place where it is currently located is the King Account system. This system accounts for the max level of countless plants games, and the owner can use their XP points to open another King Account gradually. Because Yihao's accumulated XP points had reached level 10, King Gaiyan's account had been activated automatically. And that was the reason why for the past 3 years Yihao had been unable to level up, because this system had forcibly absorbed all the XP points it had gained. But it's all not in vain, because Yihao currently has a new goal, which is to raise the level as soon as possible to open more king accounts as soon as possible. With the remaining 10,000 points, Yihao finally raised his link level. Even though he had felt such a huge power enter his body, Yihao was still at level 3, which made him very annoyed. Followed by himself, who was conscious and suddenly woke up in a hospital. His previously heavily injured body had now completely recovered thanks to the help of his system. But it's very, very unfortunate, because 10,000 points is not a small amount for him. Meanwhile, from behind the room where Yihao was currently, there was a loud noise coming from Yunfei and his mother, who was known to have only suffered minor injuries. And now they have argued with a doctor about the nominal medical costs, which are quite high because the four of them were poisoned by an elite monster. They must use special drugs for long-term treatment to recover completely. That's the only way to prevent death, said the doctor. The doctor also said that the other two men, namely his father and Yihao, were not as lucky as Yunfei and his mother. The father was estimated to only live for about a month, while Yihao, whose injuries were the most fatal, could not live for more than a week. Yunfei, who listened to the doctor's words, couldn't help but shed tears upon knowing this fact, coupled with the cost of medical treatment, which is quite expensive, urging his mother to immediately sell his house to meet their medical expenses. Of course, his mother's decision to sell the house was rejected by Yihao. Of course, Yihao's presence with an uninjured body surprised the doctor and his mother and sister, because previously Yihao was seriously injured. At the hospital, Yihao appeared completely recovered, making the doctor surprised. After all, of the four people in his family, he was the only person who suffered the most fatal injuries. But how he recovered was not important at this time. The most important thing is that the three people in his family need further treatment, and the amount to be paid is 300,000 yuan, where it was a very large amount for him, but here Yihao promised to collect the money within 1 hour. Even though it was an impossible thing, a doctor himself was willing to give him an hour in the future. But in his mind, the doctor still couldn't believe how it was possible for a boy who was only level 3 to have a faster healing speed than a level 60 human like he had seen before. And then Yihao, although he had been trying to rack his brains to earn money with his savings, plus the money from defeating the spider dimension before, the sum was still far from the amount of money he needed. But there is one way to get money quickly, namely by selling items and equipment. The most valuable item in his inventory right now was the rare level 15 magic crystal. What Yihao got from the previous demon spider, and to get a fair value from the sale of the item, he rushed to a place where everyone could trade freely regardless of their level, namely the black market. Until finally he arrived at the entrance of the black market, which is now being guarded by two big men. Yihao, who intended to enter it, must have been stopped by the guard because it was not a playground for a child. But Yihao said that he came to the venue not to play, but to sell good things. The guard says we don't accept children's toys here. Shortly before he was kicked out by the guard, an old man appeared who seemed to have an important role in this black market. The old man suddenly came and asked about the good stuff that Yihao said before, and then Yihao showed the goods. The old man apologized for the guard's rudeness. We didn't expect Yihao to have such good stuff. Old man finally let Yihao enter the black market. Black market in Manhwa is quite different because this place is designed to look like a bar. So Yihao Yang knew this, feeling amazed and far from what he had previously imagined. Then on the way to the old man's place, Yihao was intercepted by two unknown men. Of course, it was an act of bullying because they knew that if a kid who came there was only of a low level, it would have been his goal to sell goods. But before they could see what Yihao was carrying, a bodyguard came. The bodyguard said that Yihao was a guest of Mr. Lee, which made the two robbers feel scared just by hearing his name. Mr. Lee is a representative of a large group called Huangzheng Group. Until finally Yihao arrived at the VIP room where Mr. Lee was. Arriving there, without further ado, Mr. Lee immediately started a business conversation between them, and a negotiation session ensued. Even though he was only level 3, Yihao was a smart kid and didn't go along with Mr. Lee's offer. Long story short, here Mr. Lee will give 100,000 yuan for the price of the magic crystal item. But Yihao, who couldn't be fooled, said that he could sell his 200,000 yuan worth of magic crystals elsewhere, and he walked away from that place. But at the exit, he was confronted by two large bodyguards, and it turned out that Mr. Lee had planned the incident. Even though he could fight and escape from that place using the Qian King's power, Yihao didn't want to take the risk and cause chaos that would make things difficult for him. Confusion immediately swept over him, between taking the offer of Rp. 100,000 yuan or making a mess at the venue. During Yihao's confusion, a masked bodyguard appeared who was bigger than Mr. Lee's bodyguard, followed by the appearance of a woman named Miss Mo who came from a hammock group, where Miss Mo immediately offered Yihao's magic crystal for 300,000 yuan. Mr. Lee, who heard the woman's strange offer, could not say anything else, and finally, he left the room with his bodyguards. It turned out that Miss Mo's goal was not to be interested in Yihao's magic crystal, but just to embarrass Mr. Lee because there had been disputes between the hammock group and Huangzheng's group for a long time. Long story short, finally the arrogant woman went and gave the money she had promised to Yihao. Then Yihao returned to the hospital, seeing that his father, who was still unconscious, suddenly appeared as an annoying man with a bald head who was a director at the hospital. He came there after hearing the news that Yihao's family could not afford the medical expenses. The man scolded the doctor for letting them continue to be in the hospital. The doctor also said that the son of this family would bring the money for an hour. But after the director heard his words, he also beat the doctor because it was impossible for a level 3 child to earn that much money. The director then rushed towards the patient intending to remove the oxygen mask. Yunfei did not remain silent and tried to stop the director's harsh treatment. The director said that this hospital is not for the poor and commoners like you. In this heated condition, Yihao came kicking the door because he was furious with the man who had hurt his family. The director, who was now tightly gripping Yihao's clothes, suddenly burned his hand. And he, who was currently panicking, ran screaming to put out the fire, burning his hands. After that incident, Yihao told the doctor that he had earned the money and would pay extra for his treatment. This doctor also thought that the director deserved it because he was also very annoyed with a rude and arrogant person like him. After giving money for his family's medical expenses, Yihao approached Yunfei, who still looked fragile because he couldn't take care of his parents. Due to this condition, Yunfei also intends to take part in the dungeon competition, which will be held the next day at his school, where the winner will get a bonus of around 500,000 yuan. Of course, after hearing what Yunfei said, Yihao would participate in the dungeon competition tomorrow. Until the day the dungeon competition was started, it was seen that the students who had gathered in the yard were very enthusiastic about participating in the competition, which was held only once a year. This is a very high bonus and is a major attraction for students because it is different from previous year's prize of 500,000 yuan. All of this is thanks to one of the sponsors behind this event, namely the Manhwa Group, with Miss Mo as its representative. Miss Mo's presence made the students even more excited at the welcoming ceremony this time, but not only that. The final winner of this competition was able to directly enter into the Manhwa Group, which was known as the Raid Team, which was the top 10 team in the dungeon. And that was the biggest prize and money according to the students, because entering the Manhwa Group was tantamount to the path to the pinnacle of life. But that didn't apply to Yihao, who entered this competition just to earn money. The dungeon for the annual competition this time was Shadow Forest, which was filled with level 5-10 monsters. It was the highest level dungeon in their school. It was also said that this dungeon had never been cleared even if it was followed by students. The lowest level monsters were all above level 5, and the final boss was a level 10 elite monster. That last boss was Shadow Dryer. That was why the dungeon had never been cleared by the students. Considering this was just a game, the students wouldn't die in the dungeon since it was just a copy. While their original bodies will be placed elsewhere, there are two mechanisms in solving the dungeon this time, namely PvP and PvE. Based on this mechanism, this competition allows them to form a team of up to 5 people. Meanwhile, to find out the main winner of this competition, students are required to collect individual points that they will get from killing each monster. They can also gain points from other teams they beat. And finally, the competition this time officially started. Just before the students started the competition, they gathered to find or recruit people who deserve to be part of the team. Meanwhile, Yihao was considered trash, and none of the students wanted to invite him to join his team. And instead, Yihao only became the butt of ridicule for the other students. But in his mind, Yihao didn't want to be one of the members of the team they were going to form, because they would only be a burden to him. Yihao, without further ado, went straight to the registration section with a team that would only be filled with one person, that is himself. Not long after came Feng with his flock, where Feng intends to recruit Yihao into his team. But with one condition, Yihao must lie down on the ground and bark like a dog. Yihao then fooled him back, which ended up being a dispute there. Feng, who was irritated after being fooled by Yihao, tried to punch him with his fist. But unfortunately, the fight that almost happened had to be stopped by the teacher in charge of registration. If you want to fight in the dungeon. Before leaving, Feng threatened Yihao that he would decapitate Yihao in the dungeon. After the problem had ended, Yihao finally managed to register himself as the only solo player in this dungeon competition this time. Besides that, he was also the first person to enter the dungeon. Not far from where he is right now, Miss Mo seems to remember that the two of them had met before. Miss Mo is interested in Yihao because he is only a level 3 boy, but he dared to go to the black market alone, and this time entered the dungeon alone. Finally, after the small talk, the students entered the dungeon. They would scatter randomly to a designated place. This is done so that there are no meetings between other teams to avoid fights between teams early in the game. Yihao, who had just set foot there without wasting much time, immediately finished off the monsters that passed by. But since the area of the dungeon was too large and the monsters were also spread out in all different places, it would take a lot of time to be wasted, as well as it wouldn't be efficient for him considering he was alone. So from that, to win this competition, Yihao intended to look for high-level monsters in the dungeon. because he had no direction for where he was going. At the end, Yihao followed a small spider monster which immediately took him to the place where the spider mother was. And seen between the nets attached to the trees has been hanging a woman who is known as named Ruin, who is a close friend of Yunfei. Therefore, Yihao decided to help the woman. After successfully saving Ruin using his firepower, a mother spider named a level 8 red spider appeared. To avoid the poison released by the creature, the two of them finally fell right into the net trap prepared by the creature and instantly trapped the two of them. After seeing the monster that was now right in front of them, unexpectedly the spider monster just left. Where the spider left, Ruin could breathe a little easier. But according to Yihao, the red spider's habit is to put eggs in the body of the person caught to reproduce offspring, where the creature will return to them when it's time. Because they can't use their hands, they both finally break the spider web using their mouths. Long story short, they managed to escape the spider web that ensnared them both. And before the creature returned, he also told Ruin to go and come back with his team. While Yihao will stay behind to finish off the red spider, Yihao knows that Yihao is just a level 3 trash, suggesting not to fight the monster and inviting him to go with him. Alias runs away. But Yihao's goal there was not only to come to be the prey being chased, but his main goal was to hunt and also to vent his anger after being trapped and squeezed with Ruin before. As the two of them survived, two of them were unexpectedly confronted by the red spider's mother level 8. Hearing Ruin constantly spewing disdain and trash from her mouth, Yihao told her that he didn't care if Ruin wanted to run away or run away. But don't get in the way of my fight. Yihao was already prepared to draw out the firepower of King Qian. Meanwhile, Ruin finally decided to stay there. After Ruin witnessed firsthand the extremely powerful power radiating from Yihao's body, the sudden attack from the unsheathed spider could easily be dodged by Yihao with a jump. Simultaneously, Yihao with his flame sword made a vertical slash where the strength of the attack effect flanged toward the forest. The result of his strong attack instantly killed the spider monster. Ruin was very surprised to see Yihao's strength. Ruin thought that the man had some kind of ability that could hide his level. By killing the spider monster he gets 1000 points. And Ruin, who didn't do anything in the fight just now, got 500 points, which made Ruin even more interested in Yihao. In addition, Yihao got some dropped items that fell from the body of the sea spider, which might be useful in the future. And not long after came a group of teams approached Yihao, and this team was led by Lai Yang, who seemed to have accumulated as many as 3000 points in this competition. It was known that these people were previously a group from Ruin, but Ruin was only used as bait to bring in the mother spider who was the target of hunting by Lai Yang's team. In the middle of their chat, one of the men found a body that had been roasted and it was the spider that was the target of their hunt. Seeing this, Lai Yang asked Ruin whether it was true that the monster was killed by him. And this was confirmed by him, Ruin, that he managed to finish off the red spider after forming a team with Yihao. Of course, Lai Yang and his members wouldn't just believe what he said, because they knew Yihao was just trash that was famous in his school. After all, he couldn't level up. Lai Yang believed more if Ruin killed the creature. But in the middle of their argument, a roar came from another direction. All they knew was that the roar was coming from a Tyrannosaurus, which was one of the rare elite monsters, and they will get 5000 points for anyone who managed to kill the monster. Lai Yang and his team also intended to immediately rush to the location where they heard the roar just now. "Hey, did you go to the Tyrannosaurus? You guys are looking to die," said Yihao. These words made Lai Yang angry and there was almost a dispute, but because the Tyrannosaurus hunt was the top priority, they finally ended this dispute and would continue when they succeeded in killing the monster. "What did you say?" I said. "With this must power you will only be a snack for the Tyrannosaurus," he said in a light tone, which instantly made Lai Yang almost close. And after Lai Yang left, Ruin took Yihao to go around and kill the little monsters in the forest. But of course, that wasn't Yihao's aim because hunting the little monsters would not able to bring him victory in this competition. His goal right now was to sit back and watch Lai Yang's team fight the Tyrannosaurus and only react when the time came. Then we will be taken to the location where the Tyrannosaurus demon is. From behind the bushes could be seen Lai Yang and his team. At that time, there was still doubt whether the four of them were able to defeat the creature with their strength. His frightening aura made them short of breath. But Lai Yang, this brave and unyielding young man, felt very confident that with the strength he currently had, there was nothing to be afraid of. And finally, they moved in unison, with equal speed, they headed towards the monster. But there was one thing they should have realized from the start, but it was too late because, in the middle of the road, one of the men realized that the Tyrannosaurus demon should have been black and green. But what was in front of them was currently black and red, indicating that the creature was currently in a brutal state and filled with rage. Sure enough, not long after, in front of the beast's ferocity, it didn't take long for the Tyrannosaurus demon to eradicate the members of Lai Yang's team, leaving only himself alone. Lai Yong, who has been faced with real horror, has now realized that the creature in front of him at this time is not a creature that he can fight against. Even though he has good agility and acceleration, Lai Yong this time continues to run and has not been able to break away from the chase. The demon Tyrannosaurus. The idea now is to throw the rage of the Tyrannosaurus onto other people, and the people closest to his current location were Yihao and Ruin. Even though he was out of breath as Lion continued to run from the Tyrannosaurus, he finally found Yihao and Ruin. Without lingering, Lai Yong immediately pushed Ruin to replace him when he was hit by the wrath of the devil, now right in front of his eyes. Ruin, who panicked in the middle of the incident, immediately attacked the monster with his strength, which turned out to not affect the Tyrannosaurus. And thanks to the stupidity of Ruin's weak attack, the anger that was still directed at Lai Yong was immediately replaced by Ruin. On the other hand, Lai Yong, who managed to escape from the Tyrannosaur's wrath, intended to leave there and hand over the creature to the two of them. Lai Yong then left using a vanishing skill. His solid body gradually evaporated into the free air. But Yihao, who didn't let him escape his responsibility, easily grabbed Lai Yong's body. The one who at that time couldn't be seen by the naked eye was suffocating in Yihao's hands. Lai Yong asked, "How come you can still see me?" while asking Yihao to release his stranglehold, with the reason that the Tyrannosaurus demon had become ferocious and if the fight continued they would all die from the monster. Yihao smiled slightly and displayed his mighty power in front of Lai Yong's eyes. With a skill, the earth thumped, causing it to shake and emit flames that spread towards the Tyrannosaurus demon. Lai Yong witnessed the great power released by Yihao. Instead, the shameless Lai Yong invites him to form a team with him and defeat the demon Tyrannosaurus. But all of his requests will be submitted by Ruin, who previously offended Lai Yong. Despite having kowtowed and begged Ruin to help her persuade Yihao to form a team with her, Ruin didn't even want to do that, and in the end, the two of them just left to continue their fight with the devil, which had been delayed. Lai Yong, who didn't accept the previous incident, took out a poison dagger and intended to marry Yihao from behind. But without even a drop of sweat dripping from his face, Yihao was able to easily counter the stab with the fiery blade that suddenly appeared on his back. And that failed stab was the end for Lai Yong, because when the stab of the hot sword quickly penetrated his skin, Lai Yong, who had died in this game, dropped several items in the form of a missing skill book that made the user invisible, and the poison dagger that Lai Yong previously used to stab Yihao. And after that, the battle with the Tyrannosaurus resumed. From here, the direction of the battle was increasingly dominated by Yihao, who directed attack after attack, which had an impact on the depletion of the HP of the Tyrannosaurus. Actually, with Yihao's current strength, it was quite easy to finish off the monster. However, there is a rule in the dungeon in the form when Yihao kills monsters in a state of anger or ferocity like the Tyrannosaurus demon he is fighting now. He will not get points or drop items in exchange for killing these monsters. That's why he invited Ruin to join in on a strategy he had built, where Yihao at this time would continuously bombard the Tyrannosaurus demon with his strength until the creature's HP was in the 20% range. And only after that did Ruin succeed with a calming skill that was able to calm the demon's anger. Even though there is still 50-50 success in this strategy, it works. While the devil, who was previously ferocious and big, suddenly turned small and cute. After seeing the cuteness of the Tyrannosaurus this time, Ruin even wanted to have it and make it a pet. But in Yihao's eyes, this creature was just a blob of points that would propel his position ever closer to victory in this competition. Even though this creature gave its cute and innocent look in front of Yihao, it still ignored it and still finished off the Tyrannosaurus. And instantly he gets 5,000 points. In addition, Ruin also got half of what Yihao got. Along with that, Yihao got 50,000 EXP points, where the number of points he got was much higher than defeating the ghost spider at the beginning of the previous story, which, if totaled from Yihao's previous fights, has accumulated as many as 75,000 EXP points, which he directly allocates into his system space. After a while in the system space, Yihao finally decided to buy a special skill Dia of Truth, where this skill allows him to see creatures with a very wide range. Of course, this skill is very useful for Yihao to find the hidden location of the dungeon boss, whose position is still difficult for players to find. And then after exiting the system space, a drop item appeared in the form of a mysterious egg that had strange patterns in some areas. These eggs can be hatched in incubation or used as a complementary ingredient for cooking rice. But since Yihao didn't need the egg, he ended up giving it to Ruin. Meanwhile, in another place outside the dungeon area, Miss Mo can be seen, who feels attracted to Yihao after witnessing his fight that managed to defeat the enraged Tyrannosaurus demon, because it wasn't something that someone with level 3 could handle. And a moment later, he called the headmaster to ask about how many points Yihao had accumulated in the dungeon. During this question, the headmaster mentioned that Yihao was a student who couldn't level up. Where was this fact only known to Miss Mo after it was clarified by the headmaster that at first, Yihao was a student who was famous for his genius because he had been at level 3 since he first entered the school. But after 3 years his level had not improved at all, and the reason for this is not known by the principal. The old man's words just made her even more curious about Yihao. Back to Miss Mo's original question about Yihao's previous point where now the principal accessed the dungeon system to see the points Yihao had earned. The headmaster was taken aback because Yihao's current position was in the top 3 in the ranking table. And right after that Miss Mo proposed to the headmaster to immediately announce the dungeon rankings and have the information and locations of all players published within the dungeon. Which, if this is realized, the students will wage war between teams and they will even immediately target the other team that has the most points. Among them was Yihao. Because this request came from Miss Mo as the sponsor of this competition, the principal finally agreed to her wish. Until finally we return to the dungeon Shadow Forest, where the mechanism previously proposed by Miss Mo has been put into effect. It can be seen that the settings of the players' information have been published. Luofeng started to chop down other teams that had quite a lot of dungeon points. However, shortly after the announcement regarding dungeon rankings was announced, he was even surprised by Yihao, who could occupy 3rd place in the ranking table. Although I don't know how Yihao can accelerate his position, what is certain is that Luofeng's goal this time is to slay Yihao along with the team brought by him. Then we will shift a little into the forest, where we are shown a man who is a team leader named Zhu Tianyang who is running from being chased by something. What is known is that he is running from someone whose existence is like a devil. Zhu Tian and his team, even though they intended to torture this person, all of his team slaughtered him. And of course, the person in question was the level 3 trash Yihao. And without him noticing at all, it turns out that the man behind him has a terrible power that makes drops of sweat start to run down his face. Because he couldn't escape anymore, finally Zhu Tian started to dare to attack Yihao with his fists. But that was just a suicide attack because Yihao's victory was already decided from the start of the fight. And with Zhu Tian and his allies slaughtered, Yihao's ranking immediately skyrocketed to 1st place in the dungeon ranking table. Meanwhile, the dungeon map only shows the remaining 3 teams in this competition. Among them was Luofeng's team, who had currently allied with Zhang Yi's team, and they intended to surround Yihao, but right now they are just following and haven't started the action yet. Here Yihao knows Luofeng's character very well and says that even though he looks very clumsy in his behavior, he is a very caring person. What turned out to be Luofeng was hiding and keeping a distance to observe him and was about to start attacking when Ruin was caught off guard. After that, Yihao used his newest skill to find the location of the dungeon boss, who had yet to be found. But not long after, thanks to the help of the Dia of Truth, Yihao managed to find the hidden location of Shadow Dryer, who is the final boss in this game. After successfully finding the location of the Shadow Dryer with his newest skill, Yihao rushed to the place where the monster was leaving Ruin behind. Luofeng, who had just heard that Yihao managed to locate the final boss from behind the trees, finally started his movement. But with his swift movements, Luofeng suddenly lost track of Yihao, whose existence had instantly vanished. Therefore Luofeng and his team immediately changed direction from their aim to surround and capture Ruin, who was still nearby, to attract Yihao's attention. Then Ruin, who was not far behind Yihao, was caught by Luofeng's team and his men and asked where Yihao, who had disappeared from their sight. But unfortunately, in reality, Ruin didn't know where Yihao had gone. Along with that, a large shadow suddenly appeared that covered the area, followed by a roar from that figure, which trapped the 3 members of Luofeng. And apparently, that was the beginning of the emergence of the dungeon boss from the dungeon Shadow Forest. Luofeng, who was now with Zhang Yi's team, which totaled 10 people, without hesitation attacked and bombarded the Shadow Dryer using all the best skills they had. And it proved to be effective when the attacks they threw increasingly drained the blood from the monster. But that didn't last long. Everything changed when the dungeon boss changed to the petrified mode, which made all the attacks they aimed take no damage to the monster, followed by an ability that instantly woke up countless little people and now ambushed Luofeng's team. With them being beaten in terms of numbers this time, team leader Luofeng still wanted to keep trying to beat the monsters. But not with his team members, including Zhang Yi's team, who instead ran away and tried to escape the ambush of the monsters and left Luofeng alone. Meanwhile, we are shown space, which was also captured by one of them. And this was the beginning of the arrival of Yihao, who suddenly appeared and saved Ruin, who had almost lost her virginity. It turned out that Ruin had only been used as bait to bring up Luofeng's team. Meanwhile, Yihao was just watching them from a distance as he led Luofeng to where the dungeon boss was, and it had all been designed by Yihao. Luofeng, who again felt that he had been fooled by Yihao, was even more furious after knowing this fact. Because he was still busy fighting the monsters, Luofeng finally ordered the team leader Zhang Yi to finish off Yihao. But unfortunately, that man was just a pile of grilled meat in front of Yihao. With the power of fire from the king of Cayenne, Yihao immediately finished the man. After killing several monsters, Luofeng, who was angry, made Yihao come straight to him and intended to attack him. But with just a light slap, Luo Feng was instantly blown away easily. Here Luo Feng said that Yi Hao would not be able to finish off the boss monster alone. But in front of his eyes, this Yi Hao displayed his formidable strength with the power of fire, forming hot needles in the air, freely raining down and piercing the bodies of the monsters, who died instantly. Not only that, but the indiscriminate attack also stabbed Luo Feng's remaining team in the middle of the battlefield. With the death of the little dryers, the dungeon boss absorbed the energy essence from the monsters that were now scattered on the battlefield. And thanks to this absorption, the bodies that seemed to have started to crack before suddenly turned into the shadow state mode, which is smaller in stature than before, but has a greater intensity of power and is the final form of a shadow dryer. It was as if the speed of sound was instantly behind Yi Hao's back. Yi Hao felt that it was not the speed that a level 10 boss possessed. With his size being reduced to a minimum and his speed increased, Yi Hao was easily blown into free air, followed by a follow-up attack that was directly aimed at him. On the other hand, Luo Feng, who was watching the battle, laughed at Yi Hao, who with all his ego still wanted to face the creature alone. But Yi Hao, who didn't heed Luo Feng's words, showed his fangs again at this time, where with just a breath, Yi Hao was behind the back of the boss monster, immediately attacked with several swift attacks that couldn't be seen by ordinary eyes. And this fast attack perfectly succeeded in killing the dungeon shadow dryer boss and getting 10,000 points as the first assassin of this dungeon shadow forest. Killing the boss monster ended the dungeon competition session this time, and the opening of a gate to the real world. Luo Feng, who previously underestimated Yi Hao, now knelt in front of him after seeing Yi Hao's ability to defeat the boss monster by himself. Luo Feng also apologized to Yi Hao and asked him to be an older brother like in the past. But here Yi Hao was saying that this shameless Luo Feng didn't have the qualifications to be called his little brother. Until finally Luo Feng ran away from Yi Hao by tearing a piece of paper that was able to teleport him at close range. And Luo Feng was now in front of the gate. He did it so Yi Hao wouldn't kill him, and Luo Feng could still benefit from clearing the dungeon this time. But unfortunately, before Luo Feng managed to enter the gate, suddenly the most delicious slash came from Yi Hao's slash from a distance. And that attack succeeded in killing Luo Feng, which made him now get nothing in the dungeon competition this time. After successfully defeating the boss monster, Yi Hao did not forget to get some drop items and a rare healing item. But the item is not very useful for him. So from that, Yi Hao handed the item over to Ruin, who was more suited to using the item. Before they could get out of the dungeon, there was a sudden warning followed by an earthquake. It was an abnormal occurrence in the dungeon, and it is known that this abnormal event occurs when there is a very serious problem from the outside or in the real world. Yi Hao and Ruin was still in the dungeon and was faced with an abnormal situation due to a serious problem that occurred outside the dungeon. And if the two of them don't get out of that place as soon as possible, then it is very likely that they will be trapped and will never be able to get out of there. Then in the middle of the road, Ruin still stumbled in a critical condition, even though it was very troublesome for him, but here Yi Hao still helped him, because Yi Hao had decided beforehand that Ruin was part of the team formed in the dungeon. So to save him, Ruin was thrown towards the gate, which shortly after the time ran out, the gate immediately closed tightly. Meanwhile, Yi Hao, who was still in the dungeon, used a scroll that could teleport his copy's body to his original body outside the dungeon. Previously, he threw Ruin because he was sure that Ruin didn't have the teleport scroll like Yi Hao was using right now, even though it was a common thing for every player who entered the dungeon. After getting out, he was teleported right in front of the entrance gate to the dungeon. But unlike before, the gate appears to have been destroyed, which indicates that something is not feeling well. Not far from where he was, Ruin was seen still crying over Yi Hao, who Ruin thought was still trapped in the dungeon. And finally, Ruin realized that Yi Hao was still alive. Even though he talked a lot in the dungeon, in the real world, his true nature was very shy. Shortly after, 3 soldiers appeared, armed and in full uniform. Judging from the variety, one could tell that they were the Black Tiger mercenary group. They were a group that had been killing people in the safe zone for about 5 years. In the past, these supposed ones had already been exiled. And the question for Yi Hao is why this group of criminals is at his school. But what is certain is that these 3 warriors won't just let Yi Hao and Ruin go, especially after seeing Ruin's curves that made one of them stick out their tongue. Don't worry, the 3 of them are already in my hands, Yi Hao said, which immediately irritated the 3 soldiers with the words that came out of this level 3 man. But with his strength, even though the enemies had reached level 15, in a matter of seconds the 2 people were immediately killed. Meanwhile, one more person was left dying by Yi Hao for the sake of extracting some information from him. The guard said, "This is impossible. How can you beat level 3 and kill us so easily?" The guard then intended to give up everything he had to get Yi Hao's life pardoned. But Yi Hao didn't hear that and directly stabbed the guard with his flame sword. Feeling frightened, this soldier finally leaked information that Black Tiger's arrival at their school was aimed at killing Miss Mo from the Hanmo group on orders from Wang Zhang's group, who paid them. Not only did they let them enter the safe zone, but Huang Zheng's group also lent the leader of the Black Tiger a rare item to restrict the movement of the bodyguards around the powerful Miss Mo. And after getting the important information, Yihao releases the fire sword that is embedded in the body of the sea soldier, which makes the soldier almost die. Then Yihao gave him a blood booster drink to save his life. But unfortunately, it was completely useless because from the start Yihao never once said if he would spare the soldier's life. As a result, the soldier died and burned thanks to the burning effect that was still stored in his body. After the incident just now with his school being blocked, Yihao directs Ruin to immediately go find the safest hiding place. Meanwhile, Yihao will save the lives of the people in the school because by now he already knows what should be done to save Miss Mo. After all, the woman still has a prize debt for clearing the previous dungeon competition. Shortly after, Yihao intends to save the people who are still at his school. Looking at the two soldiers patrolling from behind the pillars, the soldiers from the Black Tiger group were average level 15 Dan superior in numbers. Meanwhile, teachers whose levels are in the 10 to 20 seconds certainly don't have a chance to be able to face this group. Meanwhile, to find out the ins and outs of the current condition of his school, Yihao still needs 2 minutes of cooldown to wait for his eye skills to reactivate. Until finally he decided to get more information from the two men he had previously seen. And then we will slightly shift into a room where it can be seen that students are being held captive who are commanded by a large, level 25 man. Also a teacher named Teacher Li, who is seen being made a victim who will be used as material for violence by the inhuman act that will soon be committed by the Captain Black Tiger. Among those who were being held captive was also Luo Feng, who was currently looking at the other students who were undergoing judgment, and continued with Teacher Li, who is now ready to be eaten by the captain. But suddenly Luo Feng, who witnessed the man's lasciviousness, didn't remain silent and charged straight at him. It turned out that Teacher Li was like a goddess to him. That was why Luo Feng didn't stay when he saw his goddess being mistreated. But unfortunately, Luo Feng's lunge did not affect the captain and instead reversed his attack. But right now the man was attracted to Luo Feng for his bravery in trying to save a woman like a hero. And for his bravery, Luo Feng would be recruited into his underlings as long as he dared to kill the students who were being held captive. Even though he is a thug at heart, the virtuous Luo Feng would not willingly join a band of thugs like Black Tiger. Then Luo Feng directly pointed the knife at the captain. But it seemed that it was useless because there was a level gap that was too far from the two men. The enraged captain immediately pointed his sword at Luo Feng. But unexpectedly Luo Feng was shocked to see the man who had almost killed him suddenly fell with a deadly spider fang stuck behind his back. And of course, the attack was carried out by Trash, who couldn't level up Aka Yihao, who immediately appeared in his disappearance mode. The soldiers, who were completely unaware of Yihao's presence and their captain who was knocked down by him, didn't stay silent. They attacked Yihao simultaneously, but to Yihao they were just a running pool of points that he would use to level him up. After the short fight before, finally, the students who were held captive can now breathe easy because of the arrival of Yihao, who succeeded in slaying the Black Tiger soldier who was guarding there. Yihao, who witnessed Luo Feng's heroism earlier, said that he was now qualified to become his little brother, and Luo Feng naturally accepted Yihao's offer happily. Luo Feng, who wanted to get stronger, crouched down in front of Yihao, until finally Yihao gave him a knife on the floor that Luo Feng was going to use to execute the captain who was still alive. With the death of Captain Black Tiger at Naya's hands, Luo Feng immediately skyrocketed, with his level rising by 5 at a time. And now that it had reached level 10, it was such a great thing that Luo Feng prostrated himself again in front of Yihao and promised that this loyalty was only for you. After the prisoners were rescued, the cooldown time of the Dia of True Skill had run out, and Yihao immediately activated his skill to find out all the conditions that were happening at the school. From what he saw using his skills, many teachers and students were being held captive in the gym room. Although the guard level is not very high, there are a lot of them. Meanwhile, the warehouse area will be a good hiding place for them because there are no patrols and guards there. There were also 2 level 40 masters in the building. Among them was a level 45 one in the break room. There was no doubt that he was the leader of the Black Tiger group, who had level 20 bodyguards around him, and also level 40, which is currently in the school parking lot. Finally, Yihao, who already knew the current conditions, assigned Luo Feng to immediately take the people in the room to immediately go to the warehouse area to save themselves. And just in case, Luo Feng would also be given spider fangs to guard against threats that could appear at any moment. Meanwhile, Yihao was currently rushing towards the parking lot towards the location of the level 40 Black Tiger member, because he still didn't feel confident about saving Miss Mo, who was currently guarded by the leader who was level 45. And even he still didn't know if he was able to fight this level 40 or not. In his system space, with a total accumulation of 50,000 Rupiah EXP points, Yihao raised his link level, which is currently level 21. So this link level is Yihao's link level with King Kai Yan's account, which will make Yihao increase when he uses the enhanced power of King